Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the Corning Museum of Glass for giving me the opportunity to be here today presenting my paper. This is a very important experience for me, and I am sure that I'm going to benefit from your questions, advice, and comments. The presence of reverse painting on glass in the Hispanic world has been understudied by art historians. However, it has left many documentary traces and beautiful works in numerous collections. The overall chronology suggests that the appearance of reverse painting on glass in Spain was motivated by circulation and especially by the transfer of works from other European courts to the Spanish monarchy. I project on the screen some examples of paintings in Spain. While I have not been able to precisely date the first arrivals of paintings of this type in Spain, most of the documentary evidence points to a period of significant presence starting in the late 17th century. Thereafter, it was exported to the Viceroyalties in Latin America. The presence of preserved works is especially numerous in Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. You can see some of them on the screen. The geographically transversal approach of my research aims to underline the need for shared history studies. It is fundamental to highlight the common knowledge of artistic practice on both sides, the question of taste, reception, and use of the works in the different spaces. I will now present three case studies that illustrates the production of works carried out in different geographies. These are selected to research a variety of issues like notably use and display, symbolism, authorship, circulation, and reception. The first case study is one of the chapels in the cloister of the Descalzas Reales at Madrid. It's dedicated to Our Lady of Guadalupe. The first thing we notice is the builded wood gate that closes the chapel, and it is surmounted by two eagles wording the inscription in Latin, which says that it was commissioned by Ana Dorotea and dated in 1653. When the gate of the chapel is open, we discover an altarpiece of mirrors painted on a golden altar and surmounted by a sculpture of the Immaculate Conception. We have to understand that the convent of the Descalzas Reales operated as a diplomatic network of the royal house of the Habsburgs. Sister Ana Dorotea, who commissioned this work, was born in Vienna in 1612 and died in Madrid in 1694. After the death of her father, her aunt, Margarita de la Cruz, asked that her niece be sent under her custody to the convent of the Descalzas Reales, where she will take the habit in 1624, changing her name to Sister Ana Dorotea de la Concepción, which demonstrates her strong attachment to this dogma. The relationship between both was very close, as we can see in some of the documents preserved. During her stay in the convent and after the death of her aunt, Ana Dorotea promoted several commissions, such as the remodeling and decoration of the main staircase in 1684. I believe that an important aspect in understanding the mirrored altar is to consider the artistic collection of her father, Rudolf II. Known for his passion as a protector of the arts and science. More specifically, Rudolf II, gathering his castle in Prague, works in glass from the best artistic centers of glass painting, Nuremberg, Augsburg, and Prague. The artistic environment in which Ana Dorotea lived through her father's collections, as well as the extensive production of painted glass, could explain why a work of painted mirrors was commissioned at this early date in Madrid. In the documentation located in the Descalzas Reales archive, there is nothing related to the commission of the work. Despite this, the documentation helped us to understand the tense atmosphere that exists at that time in relation to the cult of the Immaculate Conception related to the Spanish monarchy. The iconographical program is dedicated to the Immaculate Conception, and the order in which it's read is a complex task. Each of the mirrors are arranged in such a way that they have a specific order and interrelationship between them. All the mirrors have an inscription in Latin identifying the scene. It is composed by 21 painted mirrors dedicated to the strong woman of the Bible as prefigurations of the Virgin. These are represented in pairs on each side since they have similar moral values. It is very interesting that the woman chosen to illustrate this cycle can be separated into two types, women as mothers and women as leaders. The existing historiography about the piece upholds that the iconographic program is based on a book about distinguished women of the Old Testament, written by Fray Martín Carrillo, Margarita de Austria's confessor, dated in 1627 and dedicated to her. In the prologue of the book, which is still kept in the archive of the Descalzas Reales, we can clearly read the intention of this gift. To give to the world a rare example and prize of another woman who is distinguished by the law of grace and who can compete and equal in holiness, nobility, courage, and virtues with the most famous of the ancient law. The direct comparison of Margarita de la Cruz with the strong woman of the Bible makes us think about the adequacy of an iconographic program like this in the convent, in such a way that the nuns could see their reflections in their representations by playing a game between literal mirror and moral mirror with the strong woman of the Bible. Carrillo's text, although it does not say so directly, has an important political charge since it defends women who live the domestic or maternal spheres, sometimes using lies, violence, or seduction, to end up in the public and private spheres. Completing the iconographic program, there are 53 allegorical panels which represent aspects of the life of the Virgin and Christ. It is interesting to note that some of the mirrors escape the viewer side, surrounding the sides of the raised ledges, as well as the sides and top of the canopy, so it is not easy to photograph or observe them in detail. The program is completed by the panel on the front altar, which represents the Immaculate Conception. About the artist, it has never been doubted that it was Sebastián Herrera Barnuevo, born in Madrid in 1619 and who died in 1671. He was a disciple of Alonso Cano, with whom he learned the three arts, architecture, sculpture, and painting. His interdisciplinary formation is reflected in the execution of this chapel. He collaborated in many ecclesiastical artworks and royal commissions. In 1662, he was appointed Maestro Mayor de Obras Reales and later became a royal painter. We still have many questions about his relationship with the altarpiece of the Descalzas Reales, mainly why was he the artist chosen to paint the mirrors when there were already artists at the time from Italy or Flanders who had more experience in executing the technique. Although many of his works are not preserved, there are preparatory drawings for some of his lost commissions, such as the ones for the altar of the Chapel of Nuestra Señora del Buen Suceso in San Isidro, Madrid, where he made another cycle of a strong woman of the Bible. The preparatory drawings were studied by Harold Whitley and Alice Sunderland Whitley in 1966. They are preserved in the National Library of Madrid, and I suspect that they serve as a basis for both spaces, since they are also similar to the Descalzas Reales altarpiece. It is undoubtedly a piece loaded with political, religious, dynastic, and symbolic connotations. The other case study that I present today is very different. It takes us to the other side of the Atlantic, the chapel of the Sanctuary of Jesus the Nazarene in Atotonilco in Mexico. This sanctuary is located in the outskirts of the town of San Miguel el Grande, and its construction began in 1740 by order of the chaplain Luis Felipe Neri de Alfaro, who wanted to recreate the Church of Santo Sepulcro of Jerusalem in New Spain. The intention of its founder was very clear, and a lot has been written about this peculiar church. His aim was to found a sanctuary that will literally represent the new city of God destined to a perfect Christian society. The descriptions of travelers make constant references to the similarity of the doctrinal, architectural, and pictorial program of the sanctuary with the heavenly Jerusalem. The founders desired that this space become a place charged with spiritual symbolism and mystical experience leads me to believe that the choice of painting on glass to decorate one of its altarpieces must have been deliberated and must have worked to enhance the symbolism of the space. In September of 1766, Luis Felipe wrote a text describing the sanctuary. The description mentions the Chapel of the Rosary, which is located in front of the sacristy entrance. It is a chapel in which glass and mirrors play a leading role, especially the 15 painted glass that appear in its altarpiece. It is therefore a case in which materiality has a high symbolic and religious charge. It is also interesting to think about the internal circulation of the technique within the viceroyalty of New Spain, because this town was not a great artistic center, so everything points to the fact that these paintings were probably imported, possibly from Mexico City. In this case, both the iconography and the placement of the glass representing the mysteries of the Rosary around the sculpture of the Virgin reminds us to the iconography of the Virgin of the Rosary in prints and paintings, where she appears surrounded by tondos in which the mysteries are represented. Without a doubt, it is a translation of models in which the painting on glass not only adapts, but also strengthens the iconographic discourse through its materiality. The mysteries of the Virgin of the Rosary are now representations of the ethereal and the pure through the glassy material. They also contribute to the luminous qualities thanks to the quicksilver technique that is mentioned in the reference, and which provides brilliant effects and reflections for the spectator, offering a sight of the celestial and the intangible. Therefore, in the work we are studying here, a material iconographic translation is produced, giving the work a series of effects through artistic technique which intensify meaning. Another of the fundamental parts of this altarpiece is a star situated above the niche of the Virgin. 2 years after the document, in 1768, we find the sacred poems arranged by Don Manuel Antonio Valdez y Munguia, which allude to the altarpiece and the star that crowns it, also mention that it contains relics. This is interesting to me because I have found some evidence that early on painting on glass was used for the decoration of reliquaries in some European examples. In this case, the iconography of Saint Dominic appears completing the iconographic program of the chapel receiving the sign of the Virgin, the Rosary. The two study cases presented deal with very different geographies, the Descalzas Reales being a Spanish and Madrid example, while Atotonilco is a Mexican case. The last example I bring today combines and connects both sides of the Atlantic. In this case, I present two iconographic series of apostles made using the technique of engravings on glass and painted. During the 18th century, we find the great apogee of painting on glass, and probably because of its simple execution and because the effects archived were very similar to the more classic and difficult technique, this shortcut became very popular. The prints used in both series are based on drawings by Giovanni Battista Piazzetta, a Venetian painter and draftsman, known for his genre of paintings and drawings of expressive heads. His drawings were reproduced in engravings such as the ones of Marco Pitteri, who worked in Venice and obtained a Venetian privilege for 10 years in 1742 for his set of heads of apostles. It was also reproduced by the famous Spanish engraver Juan Antonio Salvador Carmona, a Castilian engraver who was a member of the Academy of San Fernando and obtained the position of chamber engraver in 1789. This apostolate circulated all over the Hispanic world, reaching an incalculable diffusion in the peninsula and the entire American continent. The series of engravings includes a total of 28 images. Each apostle, whose head is surrounded by a large nimbus, is identified in the lower part of the frame with his name written in Latin. Underneath, there is an allusive phrase, also in Latin, legible only in certain cases. This diffusion of this iconography stands out especially in the territories of the real audience of Quito. There are many examples where we can see this iconography in surviving sets of prints, such as those in the Museo del Carmen de la Villa, de Leiva, Boyacá, Colombia, but also as they were used as models for painting on canvas, such as in the Palacio Arzobispal de Quito or in La Merced, Quito. However, in spite of the fact that the diffusion of prints has been treated by many scholars, what interests me here is not identifying another European print used as a model in Latin America, but rather that two almost identical sets of painting on glass exist on either side of the Atlantic using the same technique and model. This is the case of the altarpiece of the Sacristy of San Salvador de Oña in Burgos, Spain, and the Chapel of Jesus de Nazareth in Marinilla, Antioquia, Colombia. No one has compared them before, but really no one has studied them in detail at all. In fact, in the case of Marinilla, until the restoration of the paintings, it was not even known that they were painted on glass, and they were thought to be on canvas. In the monastery of San Salvador de Oña, more concretely on the top of the drawers of the sacristy, we find some small glasses in the banks of the altarpiece with the apostles. Some authors claim that these paintings on glass are made with Carmona's prints, probably because of their wide diffusion and the proximity to the engraver's place of origin. However, if we see at the screen, we can see on the left, we find Piteri's engraving representing Saint Matthias, in his representation in glass painting in the center, and on the right, we find the engraving of Carmona. Everything seems to point to the fact that the engravings correspond to Piteri, but in any case, it is necessary to study them directly. It is interesting, therefore, that we locate another series of prints glued on glass with the same iconography in Antioquia. It is important to know that Antioquia was one of the most isolated regions in South America. There were few colonial works ornating its churches, and at the end of the 18th century, there were important changes. On the one hand, the origin of the so-called Antioquiteña colonization, in which numerous paintings and sculptures began to be sent from Quito to cover certain religious needs in the churches. Therefore, a market was established with the south of the Viceroyalty. This commercial route followed the course of the Cauca River. This series is incomplete and in poor condition, but still 10 of the glass paintings have survived. In Antioch, we only found 5 series of apostolate, 5 in painting and 1 in engraving. It is necessary to emphasize the proximity between this work and the paintings of the Archbishop's Palace of Quito, where the characters stands out on black flat backgrounds and presents a greater concreteness of their features than in the engravings. The relationship between both series is accentuated by the coincidence of the 2 inversions with respect to the engravings of the figures of Santiago the Minor and Saint Simon. There are many questions that remain open in the comparison of these works. Where were they made? Are they Iberian Spanish imports or Quiteño colonial products? This is an important question because within the vicerroyalty of Peru, Quito is one of the places where the greatest number of painting on glass is found. I hope to be able to solve some of these through direct observation in the future. By comparing the uses and function of these examples, I also hope to discover if there was an association between the material and its symbolism, or if there was a certain privilege or preferred placement for such works, such as in sacristies or in the lower parts of altarpiece, where more close-up viewing was possible. So this is all I have time for. I look forward to your comments and questions, and thank you for your attention.